I think that's the hardest part, is dispelling a lot of the myths, or the things that there's a lot of covert things, you know, that they hide behind, and like the semantics games that they play with, you know, we don't teach this and the standards don't require that. And that's great. But again, you need to look at, well, but you're not the ones who are training the teachers. You're not the ones who are going in and hosting these meetings and writing the curricula. So let's go and find out what those folks are going to be training the teachers to say. Let's see what they think, and the ideas and philosophies that they're embedding and putting behind this. And that's, again, where you're confronted with all of stuff that's like, that's not appropriate for school. You're delving into parental rights issues. You're delving into things that are dangerous, I think, for children to learn. Issues of affirmative consent sounds like a great concept until you realize that you are training children how to consent to sex acts. That should never be an appropriate thing that could even go into someone's mind. That would be okay, not only just for a strange adult to normalize strange adults having these concepts, these contacts with these kids and discussions with children. It just desensitizes this whole level of what protects kids, which is their uncomfortableness of talking about these things. Kids aren't supposed to be comfortable. It's not for children to be discussing. And so in order to get these concepts out there, you actually have to like desensitize them to stop them from getting giggly and uncomfortable having these discussions with other adults or with co-ed classrooms. And that to me is just such a dangerous area to be approaching.
So a lot of people, when they hear comprehensive sexual education, they think, oh, sex ed. It's like what we had when we were in school. We learned about human development and about puberty and fetal development and those type of issues. But comprehensive sexual education goes a lot further than that. And its beginnings started with a man called Alfred Kinsey, who they call him the father of the modern sex education. And Alfred Kinsey was a man who studied sexual response of individuals, mainly children. And he did this by conducting a series of experiments with children under the age of 14, where he would record how many orgasms a child would have within a given period, typically a 24-hour period. The youngest child that he experimented on was 5 months old. And if you want to see his research, you can get it online. And all you have to do is Google Table 34, and you will get what he recorded when he conducted these experiments on children, and the ages of the children, the sex, and how many orgasms that they supposedly had within a given period of time. Now, the reason that he thought that, or he claimed that these children were enjoying this, was because he recorded their reactions, which was screaming, moaning, thrashing, trying to fight off their partner, which was the person who was molesting them. And from his experiments, he determined that we are sexual from birth. And this is what the modern comprehensive sexual education is built on, the notion that we are sexual creatures from birth, that children have the right to sexual pleasure and to explore their sexuality. They have a right to sexual autonomy. They have a right to advocate for their rights, their sexual rights. And parents are a barrier to those sexual rights. And so this is the concept that comprehensive sexual education curriculum is built on. And you can see this reflected in the type of lessons that they have. Comprehensive sexual education typically and frequently tells kids that they have a right to explore their sexuality. They have a right to birth control and to seek that out. They have a right to sexual privacy, even from their parents. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
And again, everyone ignores Kinsey's work because of the broader picture. It's like they're forgetting the fact that there's children. There's this whole chapter on this whole horrifying study that was done on kids. And it's like that whole body of work was completely ignored for the greater good of what his work did to normalize sexuality for different people. And they're doing, that's how CSE works too. It's kind of, everyone ignores this one part of what we're talking about, children here. That's what we need to be focusing and remembering on it, or focusing on and reminding ourselves, is that these are children that this experiment was done on, not that it proved that, you know, people were, as I think he was trying to prove that people had more fetishes and normalizing fetishes among sexual people. But I don't understand how it was a huge thing. I mean, you can watch movies from the 50s and stuff, and they talk about Kinsey in, you know, scenes from the college, and they bring it up. It was this huge book. But I don't understand how they got past, how anyone could have gotten past table 34. To me, that's just absolutely horrifying. And then to create an entire curriculum based off of this, ignoring the fact that it was based on the molestation of children, and he was a pedophile and a pervert, is just insane to me. I went to an event to learn more about this when I was first starting out. It was put on by a popular organization here in Washington State. It happened to be learning about the female pleasure and sexual education, and throwing in a pole dancing event on top of it. And they talked about Kinsey. These people who were giving this comprehensive sex ed talk were talking about Kinsey, and how they address things to our children and stuff. And they glowing reviews of Kinsey, that he was a great person. I think she even said he was like a personal hero of hers. And I was like, what? Is this the same person that we're talking about? He's the pedophile? Because I had, you know, read that part. And then the other interesting thing about that event is they had asked everyone to write down on a piece of paper when they first noted and learned about female pleasure. And everyone wrote it down. They were like, okay, completely anonymously, don't put your name or anything, and just ball it up and throw it into the middle of the room. They were talking to a room of sexually active adults. It was a 21 and over event. If you know that adults are uncomfortable talking about this stuff, why would you want to go into a classroom of 7th graders, 5th graders, 4th graders, and have these discussions in co-ed classrooms and try and remove that barrier from them, to where you, like, if you know that, I didn't understand that. It seems so oxymoronic to me. But the Kinsey thing, and I was like, that's insane to me. That, and then you're teaching this to children. It was crazy. I think a lot of people ignore that, or don't know, and they don't know that organizations like SECUS were actually formed from a connection with Alfred Kinsey and Mary Calderon, who worked for Planned Parenthood and then left to form SECUS, who's one of the big pushers of comprehensive sexuality education. They were great friends, and she was, you know, a follower of his. And that's what their whole basis is based off of, this idea that children are sexual from birth.
So what we have heard a lot about this new law is 4 main points about it is that schools are required to teach information that is age appropriate, medically accurate. Parents have the right to opt out, and schools can choose their own curriculum. So there are some problems with all 4 of those points. First of all, what they consider age appropriate, when you know, they don't say in the law what is age appropriate. They say according to the standards. Okay, so you have to look at the standards, the learning standards that they teach by and that curriculum has to adhere to. And the standards they're kind of vague too, which opens up the door for interpretation. Okay, so what does the district consider age appropriate? The only way you can really determine what the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the OSPI, considers age appropriate is to look at curriculum that they have already said meets the standards. We have looked at several of the curriculum. You know, right now there's only one that they have said meets the standards for kindergarten through 3rd grade. When you look at that one curriculum, it's the 3 R's, which stands for rights, respect, responsibility. In kindergarten, they start teaching kids about their intimate body parts, and describing them and what they can do. For instance, a girl has 3 holes and a sensitive little area at the top called the clitoris. And this is being taught to kindergartners. The 3 R's also, I think it's 3 R's, points out that a girl's vagina can stretch in order to accommodate a penis. Now, in the standards put forth by the OSPI for kindergarten, it says that they're going to be teaching kids that kids have parts. Boys have parts, girls have parts. Some of the parts are the same, some of the parts are different. That's a very broad description or a broad standard. It can be interpreted many different ways. When you go into the curriculum, you know, explaining that a girl has 3 holes in a sensitive little area called the clitoris, that is telling kids that a girl has a different part than a boy. And what the OSPI has done is they haven't stated specifically what teachers are to teach and what teachers are not to teach. They've put a door there and they've said, here's a door. Sorry, I'm in a gym.
They're kicking you out.
Anyway, it says that, you know, it's like they put a door there and they've said, here's a door. It's an option for you. And there will be teachers that will go through that door. We don't know which teachers it is that will or will not go through that door. So if somebody else would like to talk about that also, I'm going to see if I can get these lights back on.
Or should we, do people have questions that we can answer or anything?
Yeah.
Or something?
Okay. Yeah, we have one in the chat. Did the original draft of SB 5395 allow parents to opt out? Don, do you want to talk about opt out?
Yeah, it did allow it, and right now parents have that option right now too. Of course, it doesn't give you a lot of comfort. Doesn't give me any comfort opting out.
It's not something you can technically opt out of. I think it was really powerful when you went to, because the goal is, as Sika says, it's sex ed for social change. That's the big picture, right? So we had some girls from middle school who had actually been through a CSE rollout. They were in their district. It was like their 2nd year, and they talked about how it had actually changed the atmosphere of their school, how people were actually using curriculum lessons in sexual harassment situations and telling them, hey, go look at page 46. And they're like, what is that? And then they go and look at their book and they're like, oh my gosh, what are they trying to say to me here? Is you know, are we discussing homework, or are they saying something inappropriate to me? Not to mention the kids who were opted out by their parents were bullied and teased for being opted out of the classroom. And then you can never really get away from the locker room talk and all of that, which is which I think is pretty standard, but I think it was really poignant for them to point out that it actually changed their school, and the talk became a lot more lewd and crude, accurate,
Well,
but a lot more in depth than is necessary or appropriate. And then so that was they had a terrible time with it, and don't want to see it happen in other districts.
Another example was over in Spokane, where it was discovered about a year after they had started the 3 R's curriculum. They discovered the kids were playing these games. They had one for each day of the week. Monday was Molest Me Monday, and it kind of got progressively worse from there. But, they were fondling. Kids would just come up and grab another kid. It was an awful thing. And this was after, again, the 3 R's was put into place there.
And I think too, we're giving kids way more credit. These are children. We give them these big, huge concepts and these big shoulders, and then expect them to carry it out and act it out like an adult would. And that's obviously not what happens in Spokane. They learned kids don't know how to handle these concepts. It's too much too soon. I think one of the detectives who wrote us a letter saying that this, resembled trafficking situations with children and how predators groom children, is one of the biggest things, introducing concepts before they want to know, and before they're able to articulate and grasp it. And I think that what standards, which is a bare minimum, right? The standards being a bare minimum, but what we see the curriculums approaching at young ages is way more. Those are things that parents need to decide when, where, and what concepts that fit their families, their values. Not okay for schools at all. Parents shouldn't be playing catch up for school,
Right.
So Jackie, I think I saw you wave your hand if you had a question, and then after Jackie, we have one from Jack, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Jack or Jock, and then Grace. So Jackie.
I don't know if I so much had a question, but like you were talking about the grooming thing, that's scary. Absolutely scary. But the one thing I find it almost comical is, why did they need to teach children about masturbation? Kids figure that out on their own. So why do they think that's important in a curriculum? Because kids do that on their own.
One thing that they want to go for is to shame-free sex ed. They don't want kids to feel shamed. So I think that probably falls under that category. Yeah.
And normalizing, right? They want to normalize that at young ages, you can experience pleasure and decide what you like. And then they go into teaching you how to articulate that to people and potential partners, how to affirmatively consent to what feels good to you. And they started off very young because, again, we're sexual from birth. So the earlier you start learning about these things and getting comfortable with having these conversations, the better.
The other thing is how can they justify, and when I say they, I mean even, like a superintendent of schools, like right now, how do you justify spending this much time, energy, money on this type of thing when we need to be spending money and energy more on, the basics and keeping up even with technology and whatnot? I mean, they're all screaming that we don't have enough dollars, and teachers are screaming they don't have enough time, and they're adding this on. I mean, it's ludicrous.
So I have a theory, and I'm going to call it a theory, just to be safe. Money. Planned Parenthood is the biggest producer, or well, they claim they're the biggest producer of sex ed curriculum in the country. In the Flash curriculum, we have the entire thing, the K through 12 plus for special education. Planned Parenthood is referenced 48 times throughout that curriculum. One of the authors of Flash is former Planned Parenthood. If you pick up most any CSE curriculum, look in the contributors, the authors, you will see Planned Parenthood there. A couple years ago, when President Trump stopped the federal funding to Planned Parenthood because they were using money to provide abortions, they lost a lot of money. I looked up, I did just a search for the finances. Before the president pulled that funding, here in Washington State, Planned Parenthood was getting over $7 million from the federal government. When he pulled that funding, it dropped down to about 700,000. So they lost a lot of money. If they can go into the public schools and get our children hooked on sex and get it in their minds that they will provide those children all of the needs they have, from birth control to abortions, and now they're in the business of providing cross-sex hormones for gender reassignment, that's a lot of money that they're going to be making up. So I think that it's money. I think it's a money game. Chris Reichdahl, I think it is probably partly money. I think it's probably partly he believes in this. Those are my theories.
I think it's interesting to note that of the $1.1 million the opposition has raised against parents on this issue of their own children, they're fighting parents for their own kids, right? Yeah. That of the $1.1 million that they put to have the right to tell us what we need to teach our children, Planned Parenthood put in $500,000. I think they put in almost half of that, they said, in the article I read. That's money that they're willing to risk. I can only imagine how much they stand to make. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, no one just goes and throws it if they're not going to make their money back, right? And at the end of the day, they're a business. They're not a charity. They're a business. That's their job, is to make money. I find that very interesting. I've just, in some of the studies that I've done, you know, looking at, you know, whether or not CSE works. And of course, you know, they say we have studies that say that it's great. And most of them are from Guttmacher, which happened to start inside a Planned Parenthood facility. But the CDC did a study and found that, like, for young teens, 44% of them use condoms if they're sexually active. That number drops to 9% if the girl is on long-term birth control, which is heavily pushed in all comprehensive sex ed curriculums, is the use of birth control, like the ring or Depo or all of those things. Kids stop using, from 44% using condoms to 9%. Well, let's face it, at 16, you're not having sex with your future spouse, likely, you know, and that kind of correlates when you look at King County, which has taught Flash for years. They have shared in the nation's rise of STD infections. Their numbers have gone up just like the rest of the nation, where if they're taught CSE and kids are learning these concepts and getting them down, their numbers shouldn't be going up, but that's not the case for them. They're still getting high numbers of STDs. So what do? And they destigmatize STDs and start teaching that STIs are normal. And that's what they train their sex advocates, their teen sexperts, to go and tell other kids when they go and teach your classroom, is that most people are going to get an STD. You just go and take a pill for it. It's great. And you can get that at Planned Parenthood. They'll test you and they'll treat you there. I think that STD treatment, according to 2019 report from Planned Parenthood, was their biggest moneymaker for them. That's what they did the most services in, was STD treatment.
Yeah.
Correlation, causation, you tell me?
So Whitney mentioned studies that are done on CSE programs. The studies that you see out there that say CSE programs are successful in reducing pregnancy rates, reducing STI rates in teens. Those studies are done like 3 months out or 6 months out from instruction. That's not long enough. So the Institute for Research and Evaluation did a study of 60 comprehensive sexual education curriculum. It was a 12-month study, so they went 12 months out from instruction. And what they found is there was no benefit for those CSE classes, that CSE instruction. Pregnancy rates did not go down. STI rates did not go down. In some cases, they went up. So we have a question from, let's see, I really want to pronounce this correctly. Is it Jock or Jack?
It's Jack.
Jack. Hi, Jack. So Jack, you're wondering what happens if the law passes next month? Is it over? Can we repeal it? That's a tough one, because, you know, none of us are lawmakers, you know, we're moms. But I think if Ref 90 is passed, the law goes into effect. The only way that we can repeal it after that is by the initiative process, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's by the initiative process.
Which they have. They have an initiative going, right? 1109.
Yes. Yeah. So if you haven't heard about 1109 is kind of it's step 2. It's called Common Sense Sex Ed. It puts the control of the choice of curriculum and whether a school district wants to teach sex ed, it puts it back in the hands of communities, school districts, and parents. So the OSPI cannot decide that everybody is going to be teaching sex ed. It also requires that any sex education has to be scientifically accurate. It cannot be so graphic that it needs a parental warning, and it can't go on social media. It mandates that it cannot start before 5th grade, and that it must be on the district websites. Parents must have access to it online as well as in the school. I don't know if I missed anything.
Well, it also allows for something besides CSE curriculum. So we could actually do a risk avoidance curriculum, which is far better. It still gives kids all the information. In fact, probably more information, because you'll get the risk and the failure rates and so forth. But we won't get the bad stuff.
Yeah, which is one thing that CSE does not do. You know, it says that it's comprehensive sexuality education, but they give you all the information that they want kids to know, but it's not in what I would consider comprehensive if you're thinking about arming someone to make a fully informed decision. Like the Flash doesn't give any of the failure rates for his birth control methods. Isn't that something that kids should know? You know, they mentioned that the pull-out method is free, always available, and more effective than people think. Well, that more effective carries with it a 22% failure rate. If you're 17 years old, that, and trying to weigh a decision, that's huge to me. I have a 22% chance of potentially getting pregnant and really throwing my plans off kilter for them. You know, that's a huge thing that I think that they should know. they don't talk about any of the emotional or mental repercussions that come with early teen sex, which kids need to know about. They, did a big study and found that across the board, teens who have early sexual activity are more depressed and more likely to suicidal tendencies. And these are experiences that they consented to and likely found pleasurable, but it's still, for whatever reason, their mental and emotional maturity is not there to handle it. That's something serious that they should weigh, but they don't arm kids with that information because it could be considered shaming. I even remember one lesson that they had, I think, Jennifer, it's 3 Rs, I'm not sure, one of the role-playing exercises where they talk about the kids contemplating having sex, and one of the boyfriend likes to get drunk sometimes and do it. No mention that, when she's talking about, well, should she or should she not have sex with him? No mention of, hi, he's a 15-year-old who's drinking. That's probably not a healthy relationship for you. No discussion on that whatsoever.
And that one, the kid actually, he also watches porn.
Yes.
He watches porn, that example you're thinking of. And that was from 3 Rs.
And so many of these things were amendments. They keep saying that amendments were brought forth that were irrelevant. They were specifically tailored to eliminate potential lessons in some of these curriculums, right? Because let's not forget that this is an unfunded mandate. So schools have to come up with their own money for this out of thin air, or with their budget. They already have a budget. Now they have to throw this in there. So Eatonville School District has done a cost analysis, and it's going to cost them $300,000 to write and implement a curriculum for them. 1 day of training costs $75,000. That's crazy. That's what these districts are forced to come up with. That's going to be all levy money because the rest of their budget's already spoken for. So that's all coming out of the levy money that they have to, and then they have to find the time in the day to teach these. So what are these school districts going to do in their face of this option? They're going to pick a free curriculum like the 3 Rs. So those amendments were specifically to eliminate some of these advocacy lessons, lessons on that had role playing. The pornography lessons would have included the risks of pornography, the addiction that happens, the disassociation, the harmful women ideologies, all of these things was all voted down.
And
like they don't want anything that makes it look, shaming,
harmful,
that they call it. But no, let's not normalize 13-year-old boys watching porn. Can we say that things are wrong? That's wrong. Let's just not be accepted as society. I don't think I'm gonna say it. I said it.
And we mentioned the 3 Rs being free. It's free to anybody. So you can, if you Google rights, respect, responsibility curriculum or the 3 Rs curriculum, you can go right to the Advocates for Youth website and you can find the curriculum. You can download it for yourself. The whole K through 12 program, and have it for your very own. Look through it, show it to your friends and the parents of your kids' friends. So
follow the links. A lot of this stuff,
yeah.
You think the curriculums are bad? Follow the supplemental materials. They have a little blip in there. That's a lesson where they, tell kids to look on Sex, etc., or Scarletine. Go to those sites. They are 100 times worse. I mean, that is gauntlet, completely blown, everything and anything you want to ever possibly know, anything anyone can think of about sex. And it's introduced within a school curriculum. And so that's kind of how they get away with, I don't understand. I think if it's in the curriculum, like you own everything in that curriculum. There's nothing on any of these sites that should be appropriate for schools to be broaching with kids or directing them to look at on their own. One of the lessons, had 9-year-olds go home and Google penis size on the internet. completely ignoring all of the porn that is going to just blast in their face. You know, there's just complete oversight, but there's also seems to be just complete lack of ownership. Like if that link is in that curriculum, you need to own and stand behind everything that's on that site. I'm going to hold you to it. And BDSM, blood play, fisting, all of these things are mentioned in scarletine and sex, etc. And it's like, that's not anywhere near appropriate, but it appears on that approved curricula sheet. And so any school can pick it. In fact, Spokane just adopted it full bore for all of their grades. And just because third grade, and this is another thing, the standard, the law says that sex ed will be through SEL, but the 3 R's is still on that list because that's the minimum that schools have to adhere to.
Another thing about those lessons that you were just talking about, those sites where they take them to, in the lesson, they actually tell the teacher, make sure your IT department has brought down the firewalls, you know, so they can access those sites. That should be a red flag. You know, when you have to disable your firewall in order to show kids something, that should be a big obvious red flag there.
So just moving on here, does Reichdahl ever acknowledge the CPAC membership for OSPI? How does he try to justify Washington OSPI being the only OSPI member in 2019? Does Lori Dills ever address this topic? I've never seen an interview with her. The answer is no, wait, no, and no. So to my knowledge, and I don't know if either of you, I don't think either of you have seen, Chris Reichdahl has never said a word about being a member of CPAC. Lori Dills, we actually have seen an interview that was done by Planned Parenthood. It was at a Planned Parenthood event that was about Senate Bill 5395 before it was enacted into law. And that is where she said that she sees the future of CSE being kindergarten through 12th, not being just a once-a-year class, but being talked about throughout the year and woven into other subject areas. For instance, she used the example of Romeo and Juliet being a perfect time to talk about consent. That's the only interview I have seen with her. In that interview, she also said that she feels that sex ed should also teach kids about pleasure. As far as Washington being the only member of OSPI in 2019, Oregon, the Oregon Education something or other, they are also a member of CPAC. Moving on, are there any requirements that require the individual schools to teach the same thing? Edmond School District has Flash. The curriculum is appalling. I second that. My only option is to check in with each teacher to determine what will be covered to be clear. All the teachers in a particular school would teach the same at that school, no variations. Each school district, they choose their own curriculum. And so within that school district, all the schools would be teaching the same thing. So in the Edmond School District, if you have 2 high schools, they would be using the Flash curriculum, both the high schools. Let's see, what else was I gonna say? Oh, yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that means that each teacher at the school has to teach it the same way, right? There are laws that allow teachers to kind of vary their own lesson plan, and they can bring in different outside books, correct?
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of people write on our page and talk about issues of, which is another opt-out issue. You know, kids going into another class and a kid asking a teacher a question and that teacher just launching into the answer.
can I expand? Is that okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
Jody, please.
So I went to, when my son was going into, I think, 5th grade, I went to the parents' education night where they had all the binders out so parents could look at the material and ask questions that they had. Well, it was a huge binder, and I was supposed to just, I guess, look at this 3-inch binder in just a little bit and make my decision and sign off it was okay.
Mhm.
Well, when I tried to find out, well, what will they be taught? This is a lot. They said that the teachers could pick and choose what they wanted to teach, and there was no set standard. They can, so one teacher could be teaching something entirely differently than the next class over, making want out of the curricula, which could be the whole shebang or something totally different. And
Yeah.
that left me with like just this, okay, great. They gave me the binder of stuff that could be covered but may not be covered, and I have absolutely no idea what my kids are learning, basically.
So
That's what's going on.
Yeah.
So the OSPI has, they have developed standards, learning standards, and you can actually go to the OSPI website and put in there, I think it's learning standards for health education, or look that up, and you can see exactly what the standards are. Now, like I said before, the standards are pretty broad. So, for instance, one of the standards is teaching affirmative consent. You know, in such and such a grade, one of the standards is kids will learn about affirmative consent. Okay, how is that taught? When I hear that, I think most parents, when they hear that, what they imagine is teacher will be up there and will tell kids, look, if you're going to have sex with somebody, you better get permission. You don't go having sex with somebody unless that person says, yes, it's okay. You must get a definite verbal okay from them to have sex. Let's move on. That's not what happens. So in a lot of the curriculum, in order to teach affirmative consent, they want kids practicing. That means role playing. And Whitney described a scenario earlier where you have two, I think you described this, maybe you didn't. Anyway, here's an exercise. The teacher divides the class up into groups of 3. You have student A, student B, and then the judge. So student A wants to wait on having sex. They're not ready. Student B wants to have sex with student A. It's student B's job to talk student A into having sex with the tools that they have learned within class. Then the judge is going to listen to this exchange and judge whether they did it correctly. And then they rotate and change positions. That's teaching affirmative consent. Now, I wonder, when did no means no go out of fashion? I always thought that no means no, and we've been taught that for many, many years. Now kids are being taught that no means talk them into it using tools you learn at school. That's affirmative consent. That's how they teach affirmative consent.
What's interesting too is Senator Claire Wilson, who sponsored this bill, said that one of the reasons she did is because some college boys came to her and said, we wish we had gotten into some trouble, and we wish we had known things about affirmative consent, about how we need to do things, and had learned these things before these things happened to us. Well, affirmative consent at the college level is a Title X law. The American Bar Association actually refused to endorse it and to actually use it because it is so problematic. First of all, it's just not how it happens at all. I mean, it literally requires a verbal consent for every move, and short of video evidence, it's almost impossible to prove. Which, in order to prove that a kid got, affirmative consent during, a sex act, they would literally have to videotape themselves and be like, nope, see right there. They said yes, because it can technically be withdrawn at any time. And and then, you know, a claim be made. So the American Bar Association was like, yeah, no, this doesn't actually work. We're not actually going to use that for prosecuting cases. So but again, we're talking all these broad, you know, we're talking about teaching this to minor children. And I think so many people, when we talk about these concepts and what we want to do and what we're trying to achieve, it all sounds great, but how we do it needs to be always in our forefront, that we're talking about kids and normalizing kids role playing, trying to coerce the other into sex is just, for school, no way. No, that is a lesson that a mom and dad, you know, practice at home with their kid or before, you know, those are lessons that go, that are for the parents. I feel like there's such a parental rights overreach. And then when you compare or add this on to all of the other legislation that they have, you know, in Washington State, it's already legal that at 13, our kids are medically emancipated from us, basically. So they can go to a doctor and get treatment for STDs or birth control or abortions or any of these things without our knowledge or consent. And last year they added on to that, and we actually can be billed from our insurance for it, but receive a blank bill. We have no right to know what service our 13-year-old child participated in. And then this year, the Advocates for Youth put out the survey trying to put birth control over the counter at any age, no questions asked. I'm sorry, but if my 13-year-old is going to get birth control, that's my right and responsibility to know, because I want to know the who, I want to know the where, I want to know the when, I want to know the why, because there's a hole in my parenting, because there's no way I'm okay with my 13-year-old having sex. And that's one thing that these no shaming approaches don't do, is they don't do what the parents do, which is to ask the important questions. Because let's face it, again, these are children. We know scientifically until they're 25, their brains are not capable of making the long-term decision-making processes. It's just not physically there for them. That's why we're there. We're the ones who are supposed to put the common sense in there. We're the ones who are supposed to say, no, that's not right for you. No, that person isn't right for you. Who are you with? What do they do? Where are you going? You know, all of these questions, and none of that. It's all just this empowerment for children. It's taking the parents' right and responsibility and role away from them when you do these things, and they're snowballing it. And next year, we already know we're facing clinics directly on school, which they're going to make sound great, because, you know, poor communities where there aren't or rural communities where there aren't doctors around, you know, people will be able to go to the dentist and, you know, get their shots right on school campus. And it's easy because everyone already goes there. And then, you know, the moms who take the bus won't have to worry. And that sounds great, until you have to admit that your kids can also go to sex ed class and learn about all of these great birth control methods, and then walk across the hall to the clinic and get them. And you will be none the wiser.
Well, and tell them too, on that study that you mentioned, that the one where they're trying to get birth control pills over the counter, they are offering kids as young as 11. In fact, they were targeting 11 to 15-year-olds. And as part of that study, they were going to offer these kids birth control if they wanted it. So you think about that, 11.
And $75.
And they're going to pay $75 to participate in the study. And then the other thing, when you're talking about consent, those consent lessons start in 6th grade. You're talking about 12-year-old kids that are learning consent, how to consent for sex. And we in Washington, of course, the age of consent is 16. We should not be teaching any child below the age of 16 how to consent to sex. It just should not be happening, period.
I think my least favorite lesson is that 3 R's lesson. That's the one that just gets me every time. The one where they're talking about which activities pose the most STD risk, and they have, you know, no STD risk or low STD risk, and it actually has like bathing together listed for 7th graders, which is 13 years old. And then at the bottom, they slip in there, you know, the things in this column over here, those are actually important for building connections in your relationships. Did you just tell my 13-year-old that it's not only safe, but important and necessary for her relationship with her, you know, 13-year-old crush to bathe with them? Are you insane? And that passed OSPI's decision-making process. They looked at that and they gave that their rubber stamp and said, yep, that meets our standards, because the standards, again, are a minimum. And now any school can teach our kids that. And that's insane to me.
In that lesson, also in the column that where the bathing together was considered a safe activity that you can do to build intimacy and not get an STD, they also put in their mutual masturbation. Now, if you've got a couple of teenagers with hormones going all over the place and you tell them, hey, engage in mutual masturbation and it builds intimacy and you won't get an STD, how long is it going to stay just mutual masturbation? I don't think it's going to stay there very long. The study that we were talking about is called Free the Pill, and it is put on by Advocates for Youth, and that's the one there where they're looking for girls starting at age 11, and they will pay them $75 to participate in the study. They will also give them free birth control. Moving on here, we're coming up on 9 o'clock here, so maybe there's a couple more questions. Maybe we can get through them a little bit quicker here. Jody wants to know, why does sex ed even need to be in the schools? We are literally bringing it into the schools. Why can't it be an outside class parents sign up for evenings, weekends, or over the summers? I think for a lot of us, we would love to see that. Personally, I would like to see churches, I go to church, I would like to see churches kind of take on a little bit more teaching teenagers about sex and tackling that issue. I sure wish they would. A lot of us who are in the faith community, part of that is guidance when it comes to sexual activity. I wish the churches would take that on and take a more active role in teaching teenagers about sex and the proper place for it in our lives. I think the key—
Not the Unitarian Church or the Church of Christ, who actually are who put out that our whole life's curriculum that we're having so much trouble with here.
Yeah. I think though the key is communities and school districts need to have the choice. Parents need to have the choice. If you have a school district where parents are wanting sex ed taught in the schools, the parents and their children make up those schools. They should have the choice. They should be able to have input and be in on the decision making of what is going to be taught in their children's school when it comes to sex. Unfortunately, we have legislators and people in the OSPI office who don't agree, and they feel that they need to take charge. What was it, a week and a half ago or something like that, we were a part of a forum that Representative Claire Wilson put on about Referendum 90. And a lot of the people who were on that call were supportive of Referendum 90. I was amazed to hear coming out of the mouths of these people who were participating that parents shouldn't have a choice. There's bad parents out there. Kids need this, and there shouldn't be any choice. Kids should be required to take this. It doesn't matter what parents say or think. And my experience has been a lot of people who are supportive of Ref 90 have a history of abuse in their past. And I think that is really sad. And I mean, I feel for anybody who has that history of abuse. And it seems like, they're coming from a place where they have wounds. and they don't want their child to face the same thing that they did. They feel that this is going to save their child. Their child needs to know where their clitoris is, or their little boy needs to know the name of his penis, his testicles, his scrotum, his prostate, and all of that. That when they know the names of these intimate body parts, they will be able to more accurately tell somebody if they have been touched. Well, knowing a little girl knowing where her clitoris is and knowing that name of that body part is not going to be saving her from somebody who is much bigger than her from touching it if they are bound and determined to touch it. The thing that saves kids from that abuse is mom and dad. Mom and dad being involved with their children, monitoring who has access to their children, talking to their children. And, we've heard from people who counsel kids who have been abused, and saying, if you are being touched in the area that your swimsuit covers, that is not okay. When, law enforcement or counselors talk to a child who has been touched inappropriately, they use dolls. They use words like, did they touch you where your underwear covers? That sort of thing. And, they're able to get that information, but we're also saving a child's innocence. Their innocence has value. And, kindergarten, that's way too young to have that burden of having this knowledge, and then for a parent or a school to feel that these children are now safe because they have these words. They're not safe because they have those words. Let's see. Are the stats you're sharing posted with links on iPow? For example, the stats on 44% condom users dropped to 9%, the $70,000 a day training, free 3 hours curriculum, et cetera.
Yes, I posted a post a couple days ago that has the stats about the condom use, links to Planned Parenthood's report for their STI treatment for 2019. So yes, that is $70,000 a day. That particular stat is not, but the video from Eatonville is up that they did a while back that shows that they were at $234,000 for their estimated cost to implement this curriculum. But that number has since gone up to $300,000. I learned from insider sources. So yes, those are on there. And then I saw you asked about the clinics too. So what they're doing, at least what some of the bills, they introduced like 3 bills about the clinics last year, I think. And what they're doing is the legislature is codifying this for schools, which means they are taking all of the expense of schools having to look into lawyers and insurance and all of the stuff to figure out liability issues and all of that. And they're doing all of that for them so that schools have the simple choice of just deciding whether or not they want a clinic on their campus. And the easiest way I think they found to do it was to have outside clinics not run by schools. So outside staff, a completely separate entity operating on school grounds in an area that they rent or from the school, or a property that the school puts on campus or something like that. So they're just making it easy for schools to not have any liability if anything happened to our kids, like the Federal Way case where they had the school nurse that was raping one of the students at the school. To me, that's just a whole nother gauntlet. They had that 15-year-old girl up north who was taken by her school, opted out of class, given an excused absence so her mother wouldn't be alerted, and sent in a cab to go and have an abortion during school hours. That to me is just not only such an overreach of parental rights, but it's not in their book because it's legal. But how do you send a young girl to have a surgical procedure on the most vascular part of a woman's body and not tell a single soul that they need to keep an eye on her for any complications, because there are complications that can arise. So this young girl goes home with this, having just experienced this, and no one knows to look out for complications immediately after. No one knows to look at potential emotional or psychological issues that she may have stemming from the decision. It's awful. It is awful how they are pushing parents out of their kids' lives. It's awful. It should be criminal.
The model seems to be, all these things that start in California and they end up going elsewhere. Planned Parenthood is in schools, on school campuses in California now. I believe LA was the first one to do that, and they've got 50 Planned Parenthood on 50 campuses right now. So that seems to be the model that they're trying to spread.
So we've gone a little bit over here, but if anybody has any more questions, please, you can email us. We are on Facebook. Find us on Facebook. We're Southwest Washington Parents' Rights in Education. We have a Facebook group. Come join us. We also have a website, which is parentsrightsined.org. I think it's .org/Washington, takes you right to the Washington page, but parentsrightsined.org. Whitney, do you want to get here?
Informed Parents of Washington. Yeah, so you guys are already here because you found this link on our page. And like I said, we just started out because we were concerned parents just like you. We wanted to know exactly what they wanted to teach our kids, exactly what CSE is, coming from the mouths of the very people who created it and who push it and who legislate for it and who write the curriculums for it and who train the teachers for it and who teach it in the schools. And everything that you see on this page is exactly what we found. We just want parents to know we know knowledge is power. We were just so amazed, so grateful, and so thankful that so many people stepped up beside us to fight this battle. Even though the law was passed, I think that parents are aware now that the people that we thought we had hired, because that's what we do when we vote someone in, the people we hired to pass laws that are common sense, make common sense, and to protect our kids, maybe don't know exactly what that means, or at least not how it would mean in the sense of what parents feel and what you feel. And so we really need to be vigilant and keep an eye on these things. We need to be active and be engaged and be knowledgeable, and never take what they tell you for truth, to always go and look and find for yourself, always see for yourself, ask the hard questions, do the research, spend the late nights. It's worth it. They're our kids. It's our job.
Yeah.
We have resource examples of the curricula on our website too. Flyers, if you can get out there and pass flyers out at church or in your neighborhoods, because one thing we don't have is a lot of money. As you know, the media is on their side and they've got all the big donations. So it's just us moms and dads out there doing our best to get the word out. So another thing, if you write letters to the editor or know someone who can, start trying to do that, and flyers, anything you can do to help us out here.
Yes.
So we have signs. We have gotten permission from the CULP campaign to be at all of the CULP rallies, and we have signs there that you can pick up. We're asking for a donation. It helps cover the cost of making more signs, helps recover the cost of having them made. Down here in Southwest Washington, we have signs in at the Clark County Republican Party office. Also, if you're in Southwest Washington, you can't get to the office, you can always contact me through our Facebook page, message me, and I can get signs to you, make special arrangements. Whitney, is there, do you have another place that they can get signs up north?
We have just a stash that are in the Tacoma Gig Harbor area right now. So if you're one of those areas, message the iPal page and we will work to try and get you on. We're traveling the COLT campaign. So we were in Port Orchard and Gig Harbor this past week. We'll be up in Bellevue. I think this next weekend they're in Spokane, but they're coming back over here the weekend after that. I think they'll be in Bellevue and Kent. So we'll be in there. I think that's the weekend of the 10th. And we always have a big tent and signs and flyers, but we're going to make the flyers available to you because Grassroots Army can print them and just go walk your neighborhood, put them on your neighbors, tape them to your neighbors' doors. You know, so many people don't know exactly what this is, exactly what R90 will do, exactly what 5395 does. And I think when they look at it and they look at the common sense side of that, it just needs to be repealed, that it's not a good law. It wasn't passed correctly. The majority of parents don't want this. And we're just, you know, wanting to get the word out, needing to get the word out more as we get closer to election.
I just put our website in the comments. I think also over on the other side of the mountains, if you're in the Spokane area, go to Against 5395 to their Facebook page. They have signs over there also. And from what
The Tri-Cities.
in
In Tri-Cities, they have a lot there too. So.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and spread the word.
All right, you guys have a good night. I got to go put my children to bed.
Good night, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.